In the late afternoon of July 2nd, 1863, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain seized history when he and his regiment, the 20th Maine, took a dramatic stand to protect the Union left flank during the most decisive battle of the Civil War, setting in motion a chain of events that would, in turn, preserve the Union and democracy as we know it today. In June of 1863, the cause of the Union was in dire straits. The Army of Northern Virginia, Robert E. Lee commanding, seemed invincible. At best, the Union's Army of the Potomac had only once fought Lee to a draw. In all other major battles, Lee humiliated opponent after opponent. With momentum on his side, Lee planned another invasion of the North. His target was Pennsylvania. The state capital of Harrisburg and the port city of Philadelphia were squarely in his crosshairs. Hoping to see the European powers of France and Britain at last recognize the Confederacy and possibly sue President Abraham Lincoln for peace, Lee felt confident that any victory on northern soil could achieve his design. Robert E. Lee was both feared and respected. But heading into the summer of 1863, the Union would be guided by yet another commander in what was now a long line of failures. General George Meade, a Pennsylvania man, would now be charged with stopping Lee's advance on his home soil. As the Army of Northern Virginia advanced into Pennsylvania, Lee looked at the small town of Gettysburg as the ideal place to amalgamate his scattered forces. With the Union in hot pursuit, Gettysburg would soon secure its place in history. On the first day of the battle, the rebels dominated, capturing the town and forcing the Yankees into a disorganized retreat into the hills. This, however, would prove fortuitous. Union forces would reorganize and secure the high ground from the far right of the battlefield on Culp's Hill to the far left at Little Round Top. Little Round Top, with its panoramic view of the field, could become a Gibraltar for Northern forces. The Union line of defense seemed impenetrable. On July 2nd, the Union fishhook would come under heavy attack on its flanks. If the Union officers simply held their positions, victory would be certain. However, General Dan Sickles inexplicably moved his forces from Little Round Top out into the wheat field and peach orchard to better use his artillery. Doing this left Little Round Top open for the taking and the Union left flank exposed. If attacked in short order, the Confederacy could hit the exposed flank and roll up the entire army. Thankfully, the Union Signal Corps made a rush call for reinforcements. With an entire Confederate corps led by John Bell Hood quickly approaching, the fate of the battle and the nation hung in the balance. The call for reinforcements was answered by Colonel Strong Vincent, who immediately began to place his units along the boulder-strewn heights. On the most vulnerable flank, Vincent stationed Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and his 358 men from the 20th Maine. Vincent knew that if this flank was turned and Chamberlain overrun, it would imperil the entire Union position. Vincent said to Chamberlain in an odd, faraway voice, "I place you here. This is the left of the Union line. You understand. You are to hold this ground at all costs."
Chamberlain, as you know, was on the left end of the whole entire Union line. So if he didn't take a stand, in other words, if he was outnumbered, outflanked, broken ran, the result would have been the breaking of the whole left of the Union line, which could have been a disaster. That would have been followed up by, like dominoes falling. The whole Union line could have crumbled, and it would have been a Union loss rather than a victory. So it was very important that he took a stand.
At all costs, Chamberlain immediately realized the weight of this order. There was little doubt that the fighting would commence soon. Coming directly at the men from Maine were the fierce, battle-hardened men of the 15th Alabama, led by William C. Oates. In seemingly no time at all, the Alabamians were charging headlong toward Chamberlain's position. To make the situation even more perilous, Chamberlain sent his men from Company B forward to act as skirmishers. When the 15th Alabama assaulted the hill, Company B was seemingly lost. Now with only 314 men at his disposal, both ammunition and soldiers were commodities Colonel Chamberlain could ill afford to misuse. Attack after attack came with both sides taking heavy casualties. But with each gallant charge of Oates' Alabamians, maintaining their stand became more and more difficult for the boys of Maine. After barely enduring a third bloody charge, the 20th Maine had all but exhausted its ammunition. Left with no other option, Chamberlain ordered a maneuver that still leaves those who study this pivotal battle in awe. Knowing full well his men had emptied their cartridge boxes, Chamberlain ordered his men to fix bayonets. It was risky, it was unconventional, but at this most perilous moment, he was out of options. As the Alabamians made their laborious ascent up the Round Top, Chamberlain's order rang out, "Bayonets!" Upon that order, the remaining men still standing charged headlong down the hill toward their approaching enemy. Swinging like a gate, the Alabamians were taken completely by surprise. As the rebels were being forced downhill, Chamberlain's lost Company B sprung up from behind a stone wall and hammered into the fleeing Confederates. Shocked, exhausted, and completely staggered, Oates had no choice but to surrender his unit.
And it was a terrific touch-and-go thing. And if it had been anybody less resolute than Chamberlain, they would have lost Little Round Top. Because there was no shortcoming of resolution on the other side. Those Alabamians and Texans were coming.
Intense fighting at the opposite side of Little Round Top also held off the advancing Confederates led by John Bell Hood. The Union suffered heavy losses, chief among them Strong Vincent, but the hill held. The glorious stand of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and his 20th Maine secured the flank and paved the way to victory. With the flank secured after the hard-fought battle of July 2nd, the Union had at last forced the hand of Robert E. Lee. Convinced that the Union center was weakened after reinforcing their flanks, he ordered a full frontal assault the following day. In what became known as Pickett's Charge, the Army of Northern Virginia marched across the open fields of Gettysburg towards annihilation. This disastrous charge would have been unnecessary had Chamberlain failed in his stand atop Little Round Top. Lee's army could never recover from the losses at Gettysburg. Simply put, the Confederacy lacked sufficient manpower to replace those killed and wounded during these 3 days of unprecedented carnage. Europe would never recognize the Confederacy. Lincoln could now confidently make good on his word to preserve the Union, and the promise of the Emancipation Proclamation could now be fulfilled.
So another thing Lincoln understood very well when he did the Gettysburg Address is that it's very important for us to win a war, not just to preserve the Union, but to preserve democracy. Because now think about this, guys. In 1863, the United States is less than 100 years old. To us in Europe, Europe looks at America as like some weird experiment. What? Democracy? People taking, making their own decisions with their own government? You need a king, you need a prince. Democracy will never work. So here we are, 87 years into our country, we're also having a massive civil war. We're killing each other. People in Europe are going, told you we were. Like, they're already killing each other over there. Gotta have a king. So Lincoln knows you gotta win this war, not only preserve this country, but to preserve democracy as we know it.
Gettysburg would make this new birth of freedom a reality. But victory at this most pivotal of all battles could not have been achieved without the courageous stand taken by Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the men of the 20th Maine.